Good morning, Ms. Teresa. Today, my classmate and I will talk about cultivating EdTech skills in students and teachers as part of our first semester ISP project. So, to kind of introduce this topic, we will mention exactly what is EdTech, some of its positive and negative aspects, as well as exactly how EdTech can help cultivate skills, whether it's for students or teachers, and also we will mention other topics within the main topic, of course, such as how EdTech has helped worldwide with the pandemic we are currently living with, which is COVID-19, and also how it has helped in the country. The first thing I will talk about is exactly what is EdTech. So EdTech is a portmanteau, which is a combination of two words. The first one being education and the second one being technology. And when you combine the two, it makes EdTech, or educational technology as well. And its function is to improve students' education outcomes. And as it says here in the presentation, EdTech is still very much like considered new technology, since it was just like imposed as of this year because of the pandemic. But it shows very much like promise as a method. Like it's gone very well. It's shown great results, although it's a little scary and also a little stressful at times. EdTech also teaches abilities, and like some of these abilities being taught, for example, is when like new content is being introduced and reinforced at like a pace in which the student does not get lost, but is very much caught up and understanding every bit of it. Also, when not just students but also teachers have to learn to cope with stress, learn to work with different types of people. It has increased motivation and self-esteem. Also, it has peers feeling like equals to each other, which is pretty great. Also, it teaches different and new skills. Really, skills are going to be touched like more in depth later on in the presentation, but like I'm just going to give a few examples. So one of these new skills could be that students get to be more involved in like a more like technological society. They learn how to work from home. Also, they learn how to use different programs and apps, etc. And lastly, EdTech uses different methods and different media styles. So I think the methods really kind of depend on the teacher in this particular case. And media, they can use, all sorts of apps like PowerPoint, Excel, Word, Prezi, maybe one-on-one activities, YouTube, music, or maybe just videos like we are doing right now. So some of the positive aspects of EdTech, the first one is that it hires employability rates worldwide, right? And this is kind of it's kind of great because really when you get a job, they want you to know the basics of technology. And thanks to all of these new tools, really learning how to use technology is pretty simple. So now there's online courses so you can learn how to use technology like in the best way possible. Secondly, there are numerous learning platforms. In fact, right down here, I put a link, right, which is from UNESCO, and it has so many websites and so many like learning platforms. Like really, it shows Blackboard, which is the one we use, Zoom, and all sorts of ways that and websites that you can learn, which I think is amazing. Also, it reduces the protagonism of the teacher as the only leader of the class. Okay, so the way I'm going to explain this is when you are in a class, right, in person, physically at the university, at the school, the teacher stands up front at the whiteboard or wherever and starts dictating, right, the contents. And even though the teacher must check up on the students and everything, online classes really show how students are just as involved in the classes as the teacher, which I think is wonderful. Like in my little brother's classes, which are the examples I'm going to use, the teacher makes sure that all of her students understand. She answers all doubts, even if it takes up 10 minutes of her Zoom class, but she makes sure that everybody at least understands what they are doing, the basics. Lastly, I will talk about the negative aspects of EdTech. So, the first one is not being able to see learning advancements. Okay, so this kind of contradicts what I said before, but obviously in a class of 35, 40 students, it is very hard to make sure that every child understands. Like for example, I'm going to use my little brother again. He's not very good at doing math, but he can be, he can write down all the exercises, but maybe he just doesn't understand how to do them. But obviously the teacher is not going to go one by one asking, okay, does everybody have the answer? What did you get? What did you get? And so and so. Also, it lowers social skills. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, obviously you are not seeing each other. You're not really with each other physically, so it's kind of awkward at times. And I guess it's not very comfortable for some, not very adjustable. With this, I mean that really, like, maybe you don't know what the situation of maybe the teachers or the students are during online classes. So maybe, somebody has an issue right before a class and can't assist an evaluation, which is really bad. It's really sad because, you have to learn to empathize with everybody in these cases. And lastly, not all learning styles are included. So there are 7 learning styles, which I included in here, which I will read. Solitary, social, logical, physical, verbal, oral, and visual. The ones that are not included or are very poor in this case would be social, obviously, as I explained before. Physical, I think that's also pretty self-explanatory. You can't really touch things. Oral, I believe too, because maybe some people get distracted very easily with background or outside noises. And lastly, visual. I think when you spend so much time on a computer, on a screen, it gets really hard to really focus on the class. So I think that's also a really big issue.
COVID-19 and education, of course, due to the global pandemic, the schools were shut down, and as a solution, most of them appeal to use the technology to keep the education on kids. Some countries develop the platform for students to have access to classes and materials to continue with the scholarship year, but this is not very effective since not all the students have access to internet. The implementation of educational programs for kids. There are new channels that streams shows for kids or programs, but all of them have the same goal, that is educate kids at home. They also are using common platforms such as YouTube to post videos to help the students or chat apps as WhatsApp to keep the communication between teacher and students. For example, the teachers assigns a chapter to read and questions, and then the students send the answers of the questions through a photo. Linea is a platform which has resources from first and elementary to the last year of high school. This page prioritizes the subject of math and language. There is also the platform called Biblioteca Digital Escolar, provides more than 10,000 free books for students to complement their classes. Yo Aprendo en Casa is the solution for those students that live in rural area without connection to the internet. It's the same material that can be found in Aprendo en Línea, but it's printed, and they also give notebooks with limited connection for the students to reinforce. Aprendo Libre and Puntaje Nacional, these both offer recorded classes and live classes in order to keep the interaction between the teacher and the students. TV Educa Chile is a TV program created to help kids at home during this time of quarantine. The channel streams educational programs for kids from 2 to 12 years old. Skills for the teacher to know in order to make the learning process easier. First, the productivity tools. The teacher needs to know how to use the word processor, how to incorporate images to the text, how to create more than one column of text, and how to create tables between others. They also need to know how to use the presentation software, for example, PowerPoint or Prezi. Teachers need to acknowledge how to solve some technical problems, or at least they need to know where or who to appeal in case they don't know how to solve it. Web resources and search. Teachers need to know how to search for material and information to incorporate to their lessons, and they also need to know there is a lot of material and resources for them to use and incorporate to their lessons. New technologies. The teachers need to be flexible and open to new ways of teaching through technology, since frequently some new apps or web pages and simulators are made in order to facilitate the learning process. Implement these skills and teachers is important, since technology is here to stay and is getting better every day. So for teachers, there must be a mandatory course for help them to get to know familiar with these new technologies. For students, there is the internet search. They need to know how to search, collect, and select the correct information on the internet for them to use in their learning process. Need to know the productive tools. They should be able to create and edit documents and presentation in software designer for this. Etiquette or the correct use of internet is important for students to use internet or social medias in the correct form, and how to write a formal mail. And copyright. For academical purpose, students need to know about copyright and plagiarism, how to quote and see it in the correct way. In order to develop these skills on students, there should be a course or a tutorial implemented by the school to help them to use the technology in an educational purpose. As a conclusion, we can say that now that the world is going through difficult times, and some schools are closed, although this is not a big problem, because thanks to the technology, most of the students are still in touch with education. EdTech has its pros and cons, and it may not be effective for everyone. During this hard time, it has been a good solution for education and students.